Readiness Initiative, and also just express that my team and I are thrilled to have you joining us in this endeavor. We created some what I think are really great tools to help with all of the different elements of this program, and we're just really looking forward to being able to work closely with you through the pilot, get your feedback, incorporate, work together, just all of that. We're very much looking forward to it. I hope you are too. I know and want to acknowledge, fully aware of how busy you all are. I know in my heart that the things that we're going to be working together on through this pilot are ultimately going to save you time and help you be even more effective than you already are in the field. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to James so we can get right into the overview.
Great, thanks, Lisa. And we're going to take a quick look here, and you can see, hopefully you see yourself on this list, but these are our participating divisions. They represent the entire nation. They represent a variety and spectrum of both geography and risk, and so we're really looking forward, as Lisa said, to working with all of you and getting your feedback and supporting you in this endeavor. And so let's talk now, really, hopefully you're familiar with the Readiness Initiative at this point, but we're going to walk through the basics of it as kind of a reminder. So readiness is defined as the capacity and capability needed to reliably accomplish our mission, which we do with our partners. And you'll see on this slide that each of the 4 lanes of the Readiness Initiative are defined here. We're going to be looking specifically at the trained people available lane, where success is specifically defined as the following: sufficient numbers of volunteers, partners, and paid staff with the competencies and experience necessary to deliver timely DCS services. And we'll be focusing on, as a part of this pilot, really 3 things. One is volunteer recruitment and engagement. Second is the steady state leadership structure. And third is training to meet the disaster organizational structure. And so here's some more information on the pilot. So this is the first phase of the Trained People Available pilot, and it's going to run from August through December of 2017. Other regions are going to participate in the pilot in later phases through FY19. And this pilot is part of a multi-year approach to strengthening the structure and processes that really are essential to build and sustain the capacity and capability of our workforce to reliably deliver our mission. This specific pilot lane aims to align DCS workforce readiness and volunteer services. Very, very important that you know how closely we've been working with volunteer services on this. To align that coordinated support to best enable region teams to develop and encourage a fully staffed and skilled employee and volunteer workforce by addressing the following challenges. And these are challenges that you're probably aware of. Numbers of our skilled and deployable volunteer workers, volunteer leaders, and middle managers. Effective onboarding, engagement, training, and promotion. Meaningful recognition and retention. Updating our worker group activity and positions, and timely, accurate, and transparent data visibility, tracking, and reporting. The goal, the DCS Capacity Building for People goal, is really designed to strengthen structure and our process to build and sustain the capacity and capability of our workforce to reliably deliver our mission. And this goal aligns DCS workforce readiness and volunteer services, as I mentioned previously. It aligns that support to develop a right-sized, skilled employee and volunteer workforce within regions by focusing on the following areas. And again, you'll see the trained people piece highlighted there. So really, the 3 things that we're focusing on, first is affirming the disaster workforce engagement position and the disaster engagement team as the enablers of effective disaster workforce engagement. What does that mean? That is, it standardizes the role and responsibilities of the disaster workforce engagement manager with the support of the disaster workforce engagement team in alignment with engaged volunteers and employees. That's EVE standards and procedures. And these things include implementing or validating an effective disaster workforce engagement team or DWET structure and contribution to the objectives of the engagement process. It's implementing volunteer services engagement guidance and DCS engagement process doctrine that was posted back in March 2017. Again, you'll find that in the EVE toolkit, to increase the effective engagement of volunteers for steady state and region operations. It orients the disaster workforce engagement position as the key disaster leader position to facilitate the effective implementation of a region workforce engagement program. It encourages the participation and collaboration in a web-based engagement forum to identify and share best practices. And the same thing for a recognition forum, again, where we not just encourage, we want you, we need you to participate and to identify multiple avenues for formal and informal recognition. So that engagement of sharing of information is really, really important. The second element here is aligning the volunteer structure and supporting functional services to attain a steady state disaster workforce readiness. That is to build a steady state table of organization using the newly released standardized table of organization positions and position descriptions. This really doesn't differ in form from what you've already begun to do with the TO positions, hopefully in concert with volunteer services. So what that means is completing an assessment action plan to implement the new steady state regional TO for both the required volunteer leader positions, of which there are 28 regional required positions, and the many options, the optional positions as appropriate that you can use in region, chapter, or territory. It means assessing and using the standardized optional positions, adapting the TO for your region, and aligning the reporting structure of the volunteer structure, the leadership list of positions with your FTEs. So we know that every region is different. Some of you have functional positions that fill some of these roles. So working to align both the volunteer positions, the leadership positions with your current FTE structure. It's assigning or identifying candidates for development, so finding people that are going to be the next leaders, working to have them complete a training plan in support of that leadership development, providing training to those candidates. Where you don't have candidates, it's recruiting into open positions in collaboration with volunteer services. And thirdly, it's fully staffing the regional level 3 table of organization by adapting the engagement, staffing, and training functions to attain disaster operational readiness. So what's that mean? It means identifying a region of a level 3 TO structure based on a large or small incidents that's done in concurrence or with the concurrence of the DDE, and to place, train, and recruit for volunteers to fill positions on that TO. And this specific task will include very specific standardized TOs and the new gaps that are derived from the new ConOps 2.0, which is about to be released, or in the near future will be released. So the tasks for this include completing an assessment action plan to reassess and validate the appropriate gap assignment for all disaster responders, completing the assessment action plan to meet the assigned capacity building goals for that level 3 TO, with a very specific focus on identifying, training, and equipping volunteers for leadership and middle management positions. So some of the steps around that would include assessing and adapting the TO for your region, again, working with your DDEs and your division teams, assigning or identifying candidates for development, training and promoting, completing the training plan, providing training to identified candidates. Very excited about this, using an updated priority deployment process, which will allow us to deploy leadership candidates to gain the experience they need for promotion. So we're really excited. That used to be a thing. It's back. We're going to be using it in our pilot regions, so we're really excited for that. And then recruiting for open positions in collaboration with VS. So that's really what we're looking at in terms of our focus. Remember, the stuff we're talking about today is an overview. You're going to get a lot more detail in the upcoming webinars, as we'll see later on here. Stand by. Lost my slide for a second. Just stand by 1 second. Just going to mute myself for a second. My slide has disappeared. I will find my slide deck and get those reloaded up there. Stand by. All right, back again. Sorry, it looks like somebody accidentally stole my presenter capability there. So I have it back now, and I've turned off that capability, so you can't do that again. Let's go to the next slide. So let's talk about division and region roles and responsibilities. And so it's a big slide. It defines the roles and responsibilities of divisions and regions in supporting this initiative. I'm not going to read the entire slide for you, but I'd really like to highlight the role of the RDO in particular. I know we have some RDOs on this call. So it's to identify project teams, ensure communication between project teams, division POCs, and national headquarters project managers to ensure the execution of program implementation activities and the achievement of success criteria. So the role of the RDO as a convener and bringing people together is really, really critical. So one of the first steps should be building a project team that includes your disaster workforce engagement manager, your disaster workforce engagement team, senior DPMs, DPNs, and DPSs, and really importantly, volunteer services. So having all of those people at the table is really, really important as a part of building your project team. The actions we're asking you to take as a part of this process really require a well-defined and coordinated effort with volunteer services. If you haven't identified your project team already and you've seen some communication around that, you really need to be doing that quickly. I have no other way to put that because we've got webinars that are upcoming. You'll see the webinar schedule here shortly, and it's imperative that members of that project team are attending those webinars or are looking at the webinars that are recorded or becoming familiar with the information as we get ready to launch the pilot. So, and members of the project team will be participating in the dashboard review process that we'll have later on. So let's take a look at the pilot webinar schedule. Obviously, we're doing our second overviews today. And again, these will be posted and available in a recorded format. Coming on Thursday, we have a session on disaster workforce engagement. So absolutely critical, if your disaster workforce engagement manager is not on this call, they really need to be on this call if at all possible, and your disaster workforce engagement team. And then next week, we have discussion of the regional steady state TOs. That's following on Thursday, level 3 TOs, and that'll actually be at NGAPS. We'll be on with the level 3 TOs, and then July the 25th, we'll have our kind of our final kickoff or a pre-kickoff before the pilot begins with a Q&A session. So next, we're going to quickly review the key components of the Readiness Initiative. So the objective of this pilot is to put in place the foundational structure, the processes, and the measures necessary to enable regions to achieve the objectives of the Capacity for People program. The benefits include new clarity and supported capability and tools to engage, train, place, recognize, and retain volunteers. It really does align DCS with VS. I can't, again, emphasize that enough. It creates standard definitions across all regions for volunteer leader positions. It's supported by a standardized training and development plan. It's a clear and attainable TO structure that indicates our trained workforce readiness for a high probability, high consequence disaster. And it also allows for a timely, accurate sharing of information and the ability to look at information through a dashboard process, which leads to real-time improvements in disaster workforce readiness. And let's talk about how, as a part of this pilot, regions will both obtain and provide feedback. So, a couple of things. Pilot regions are going to participate in regular feedback and dashboard review sessions to identify successes and challenges and questions. And there's really two sets of reviews. So there's a once monthly all pilot region call, and so that will be for all regions, much like this, on the call at one time. And participants for that should include really your project teams, which is your RDOs, your RVSOs should absolutely be on the call, your disaster workforce engagement managers and DWET, your DDDs if at all possible, and obviously we invite our DDEs or their designees and our DDSEs as well to attend if at all possible. The goal of these sessions is to identify and act on overall successes, challenges, and questions, and so that's an opportunity to share with everybody on that. And then beyond that, we'll have once monthly individual regional dashboard calls. The participants should be the same, so your RDOs, your RVSOs, your DWE managers and teams and DDDs. And of course, division team is welcome to attend. And those are more of a one-on-one session to take a look and see how you're doing. Finally, at the end of the pilot, so again, this pilot runs from August through December, we're going to do a final review session. Again, the same set of attendees. And the goal of the final session is to review successes, challenges, to identify how well we do with our customer service, and recommendations, because the whole reason for a pilot is to test certain things and see how we can make them better. And so that's what we're going to be doing as a part of this process. So let's talk now about how we're going to measure and report progress and success and opportunities. So information is going to be reported on specific readiness dashboards. And there are 4 readiness elements within the Readiness Initiative. We're talking specifically around the trained people available is what we're looking at. So each element contains a set of data as illustrated that will be measured and reported in a readiness dashboard. I don't have a sample of our dashboard to show you yet, but just know that it is going to be a dashboard. The dashboard will be reviewed regularly, as I just mentioned, and will allow pilot regions and the units to support, whether division or national headquarters, to identify successes and opportunities. And it's really important to note that the dashboard is dynamic and will constantly be changing. So it's not set in stone. You don't do it once and stop. I mean, it's always changing. Sometimes it's going to be green. Sometimes it's going to be yellow. That's going to depend on the day of the month. It's going to depend on your capacity. It's going to depend on a lot of things. But understand that it's dynamic, and that's actually good. If it stayed green or stayed yellow all the time, then it means that it's not dynamic, and we want it to be dynamic. So let's talk specifically, because I think this piece is really important. Let's talk about what success looks like for building capacity in this pilot. So what are your successful outcomes out of this? So by December the 30th, so again, we start in August, we go through December, successful outcomes for this pilot comprise the following. You're going to complete assessment action plan for the regional steady state TO. I'm going to reiterate that the positions don't need to be filled by the end of the pilot, but we need to have we need to have identified or associated a qualified volunteer with a position, or identified a volunteer candidate that can be trained for that position and assigned a training plan, or we needed to have worked with volunteer services to have completed recruitment planning. So again, we're not saying that the position has to be filled, but we're saying that you've gone through the process of identifying either someone to fill that position, to be trained, or the need for recruitment. Additionally, completing the assessment action plan for a level 3 TO in much the same way. Again, we're not asking that positions be filled by the end of the pilot, but you're going to associate a volunteer with a position or identify that volunteer candidate and assign a training plan or complete recruitment planning for that position. The goal of the pilot is to build a 1 deep capacity. However, that said, you need to plan for a 3 deep capacity, because we well know that volunteers aren't always available all the time. They've got vacation, they've got family obligations. There are other things that they may not always be available. So it's really important that we build some level of depth. So you want to be planning for a 3 deep capacity as you do the level 3 TO. And the tool that we'll provide for you will support your planning for that. So let's look specifically at what success looks like for orienting and aligning the work of disaster workforce engagement managers and the disaster workforce engagement teams during the pilot. So again, by December 30, successful disaster workforce engagement and disaster workforce engagement team structure outcomes for this pilot comprise the following. Implementing or validating an effective disaster workforce engagement team structure and contribution to the objectives of the engagement process. Implement the Volunteer Services Engagement Guidance and DCS Engagement Process Doctrine posted in March 2017. Implement a standard disaster workforce engagement manager position description, so that everybody will be using the same position description across the nation with the same expectations. And then orienting that disaster workforce engagement position as the key disaster leader position for effective volunteer engagement. We're going to require, we ask that you participate and collaborate in the web-based engagement form and the web-based recognition form. That stuff is really, really critical, because again, it allows you to share information, to find out from others across the nation in very diverse regions, some like yours, some not, to find out what's working and what's not working. So now we're going to review the specific 9 measures and metrics that will be associated with this pilot. So the pilot's going to measure a total of 9 metrics, and measures will be simplified to reduce duplication of recording and reporting. So we clearly don't want to have you enter data that's already in the system where we can. So we work very closely with continuous improvement around making sure that the reporting that we do is as low impact as possible for you. So there's going to be 9 metrics in total. Metrics 1 to 4 are going to be reported out in a dashboard format that uses data in the trained people available web-based application side, and that's what continuous improvement is building for us. That means you'll be entering data into a portal, much like you do now for either the DAT or the shelter assessments, if you're familiar with that. Metrics 5 to 9 will be reported out again in the dashboard format, and that's going to be using data that's available to us from the trained people available web-based application side, from Edge, and from Volunteer Connection. This information will also include percentage complete. So that's part of the reporting is understanding where you are in the spectrum of getting things done. And I'm going to mention again, as much as possible, we're really trying to avoid the duplication of effort by leveraging simple tools and existing systems to facilitate reporting. So on the next slide, you can see here's kind of a quick, if you're able to see the slide, really displays all the metrics and defines the data source for each. And you'll see it's kind of a mix between web-based applications and Volunteer Connection. So now let's look at the measures and metrics in a little bit more detail. So measures and metrics for number 1 and 2. The first is to implement or validate the effective disaster workforce engagement team structure and contribution to the objectives of the engagement process. And the metric is successful implementation and validation of the DWET structure. And that's measured by documentation of successful implementation through the web-based assessment tool. So that's something that you would document in the tool itself. Second is implementing the Volunteer Services Engagement Guidance and the DCS Engagement Process Doctrine posted in March 2017. Go to the EU Toolkit to increase the effective engagement of volunteers for both steady state and regional operations. And the metric itself is successful implementation and validation of the Volunteer Services Engagement Guidance and the DCS Engagement Process. And again, documented by successful implementation and documented through entering into the web-based assessment tool that you've successfully implemented that. So metrics 3 and 4, participate and collaborate in the web-based engagement forum to identify and share best practices. So the metric itself is obviously participation and collaboration in the engagement forum, and it's measured by documentation of successful implementation through the web-based assessment tool. And the same thing again for metric 4, which is the recognition forum, and it will document it. That's the metric. We'll document through the web-based assessment tool that you've successfully implemented that. Metric 5 is to identify and assign qualified volunteers in Volunteer Connection. So the regional TO identifies 28 required positions, and the level 3 TO specifies positions based on a larger small TO model, which is approved by the Division Disaster Executive. So the metric itself is the number of qualified volunteers identified and associated with appropriate steady state TO position or a gap to fill a level 3 TO. So it's measured essentially by the percentage of level 3 TO or steady state TO filled with qualified volunteers. This percentage will be used as a baseline for continued program metric reporting in the future. The level 3 TO qualified volunteers will be reported out of Volunteer Connection, and steady state positions will be reported using the web-based application. Metric 6 and 7. Metric 6 relates to, and this is identifying volunteer candidates to complete training requirements, and we're going to assign the training plan and curricula in Edge. So metric 6 is the number of volunteer candidates assigned curricula in Edge by a position or gap. And that's measured out at Edge, because Edge will automatically report curricula assigned to volunteer candidates by position or gap. Secondly, for 7 is to verify training plan and curricula complete, and that's again number of volunteer candidates completed curricula in Edge by position or gap. That can be measured from Edge, and Edge will actually report that out so that we can actually see when that's been done. So that's how we'll measure that specific one. And then finally, metrics 8 and 9. And that's to identify recruitment needs for specific volunteer positions. So recruitment needs are identified based on a number of qualified volunteers or volunteer candidates. So if you don't have a qualified volunteer to associate with a position, or you don't have a volunteer candidate to be trained for that position, then obviously you'll work with volunteer services to recruit for that position. And so the metric itself, metric 8, is the number of volunteers being recruited by position or gap. And that's measured by the number of volunteers to be recruited in web-based applications by position or gap. So you'll document that number of volunteers. and then completing recruitment planning in collaboration with volunteer services. So the metric itself is ensuring that we've completed that recruitment planning with by position or gap with volunteer services, and again, it will be documented in the web-based application tool that that's been done. So that's how we'll look at our metrics. We will have, down the road, we're working with volunteer services on some additional dashboard data that will be available hopefully in the near future. And the goal of that is to support planning and problem-solving conversations between disaster cycle services and VS to, again, help that conversation around the volunteer needs assessment and how do we successfully do that. So let's talk about the list of resources that will be available for this. So a full list of resources can be found in the implementation document and consists of the following. And this is probably not all inclusive, but it's a pretty full range of the tools we have. One is the guidance and standard and procedures. So for example, the EVE standard and procedures, go to the EVE toolkit. Assessment action plans and training plans and reports, the level 3 TO and the steady state TO, a range of job tools that will support your efforts with this, including some specific guidance about priority deployment. So how do we actually priority deploy our team members, and a supported feedback process. Now let's take a quick look at the timeline for the pilot. And this it really just highlights some of the key tasks to accomplish over the course of the pilot. And it's not an all-inclusive list, but it gives you a pretty good sense of when we think that you need to get some stuff done. I'm hoping if you're actually seeing the timeline here, you'll note that this pilot itself takes into account that that you've got a big event coming up in September-October timeframe, the planning for it and the execution around sound the alarm. So we understand that from about September the 23rd through October the 15th, there's the actual installation events that are going on around the country, and of course the planning that's occurring before that. So that's built into the timeline that we have. In fact, typically a pilot like this might go for 3 months, but actually we've built it out to allow for more time understanding that we've got sound the alarm in the middle of that. So let's look specifically at the following list. And the next list really kind of talks to what you need to do to be successful. So really your actions for success. Because now you're looking at all these requirements and saying, oh my gosh, where do I start? And so these are your recommended actions as the pilot regions, again, demonstrated on the timeline. Not an all-inclusive list, but just the things that we think are probably the really critical things to get going on. So the first one I would mention is making sure that you're communicating with your regional leadership, including your executive directors. So have the conversation, make sure that they're clear on what your goal is, what your needs are, how they can support, and what you're doing. So making sure you're having that communication, and making sure that the team in general is, is just understanding what we're asking you to do as a part of this pilot. Building the project team, you should be already doing that now. And again, I'm going to reiterate, it's the RDO, it's the RVSO, and hopefully our volunteer services team as well. It's the disaster workforce engagement manager. It's your disaster workforce engagement team. It's your senior DPMs, your DPSs, both geographic and functional, and of course your volunteer leadership and any others as indicated. So it's really up to you to build your team. Those are the key ones that we would identify for you. But if you've got other folks that you want to bring in, and I'll use the example, if you've got a really strong information and planning lead that can support with actually planning and developing a work plan for you to help with how to make this work more effectively or most effectively, then certainly leverage that skill set to support the pilot. Make sure that you have a team meeting here real soon so that everybody understands what the expectation is, that everybody's on the same page. You want to be attending the webinars or viewing the recorded webinars. We know your schedules are really busy, so that's why we're going to be posting these webinars as well. Make sure that you go and take a look at the EVE Toolkit. There's a lot of stuff already posted in the EVE Toolkit. There will be more, so look at it weekly. There's a way to subscribe to updates on the Exchange pages. Do that if you need to, but EVE Toolkit is where a lot of this stuff will live, in addition to a SharePoint site that you'll hear more about as well. make sure you take a look as we go through the process at your disaster workforce engagement and disaster workforce engagement team structure, and make sure it aligns with the new position descriptions and the EVE standards and procedures. Build that work plan. So again, that idea maybe of how information and planning can help. So how are we going to complete this work? What's our timeline? How does it align with our other priorities? We have lots of other stuff to do. Who's accountable and responsible for what? And so really encourage you, if you haven't thought about it, to use the action planning model. You want to assess your steady state structure using the tool that we're going to provide to you. So who do we have now? That's really your first question. Same thing with your level 3 TO as you get that. And of course, the first step for that is working with your DD to make sure you have concurrence on which model you'll be using. Again, the question is, who do we have right now? Making sure that you're aligned with the VNA schedule. Again, the importance of working with volunteer services and understanding what the VNA schedule is and when they need information from you. And again, you'll have some tools to support that. But really emphasizing the work with volunteer services. Ask lots of questions. Ask clarifying questions. I'm going to emphasize this one a lot. Don't suffer in silence. If you have a question, if you're not sure what to do, if you don't understand what's being asked of you, ask. Talk to your RDO, talk to your division, reach out to the disaster workforce readiness team, and we'll try and get an answer for you, but don't suffer in silence. And I say this to RDOs, but also everybody else on the call as well, is you're going to be most successful by fully leveraging the power of the team. This is not something that one person can do alone. Everybody's got a role, so use that team, understand who's responsible for what, and you will be a lot more successful. So let's talk about the expectations. So really the expectations for your project team. I'm not going to reiterate who the project team is. I think we've mentioned that enough times at this point. But there are some specific things that we ask your project team to take on as you participate in the pilot. And these actions will really support your success and ensure that you collectively, or all of us collectively, improve the quality of the pilot and the products we're using to build capacity. So again, the role of a pilot is to test some things out to see how they work, to make them better the next time. And so your RDO really serves as a convener for this team. Every pilot region should identify specific points of contact for really three things. One is for the disaster workforce engagement team or disaster workforce engagement team process, and that really should be your disaster workforce engagement manager. If you don't have a disaster workforce engagement manager, that position is open right now. Obviously, RDOs get to make that decision on who that should be. You really need a point of contact or somebody accountable for the regional steady state TOs and somebody accountable and responsible for the level 3 TOs. Make sure you've engaged your regional team and others that can add value to the effort. I'm going to reemphasize the importance of regional executives and executive directors in the ways they can play really key roles in supporting the goals for this. As can other members of the regional leadership team who may have a skill set, who may have access to new volunteers, whatever that is. But really, don't try and do it alone. It doesn't work. Work with your RE on maybe how you leverage and work with board members to support this pilot project. Certainly utilize your DCS volunteer leadership. Very critical that your DCS volunteer leadership be fully aware of what's going on, and you can find ways to engage them as well because they play such a critical role in the success of our regions. It's really important the regions identify and communicate with this team now. If you haven't already, you need to be doing it now. We don't start till August, but you really need to be planning for it now. You've got webinars upcoming in the next few weeks, and so it's really important that you begin to get on that same page. So some additional expectations really are to make sure that you're attending both the individual and all pilot region calls and feedback sessions. This is a great opportunity to ask lots of questions, to ask for help, don't suffer in silence, and to identify and celebrate progress, because you're going to make progress in increasing your capacity, and that needs to be celebrated, not just by you, but by others. And you need to be able to share how you made that happen. You want to use the tools and doctrine that are provided. So we're going to provide job tools for you that provide step-by-step guidance on how to proceed and complete the pilot actions. There's already some existing doctrine out there like the EVE S&Ps that provides additional information and tools to support your efforts. If you're not sure what it means, ask. Make sure you're communicating regularly within the team and with all key volunteers and paid staff. Your project team should meet regularly and communicate often. Every member of the project team has the responsibility to share what they're doing and what they need. So again, it's really a team effort. Make sure you keep your volunteer and paid staff that are not participating directly in the project team aware of what you're doing, and again, what it is that you need. This is not just a regional staff effort. This is an everybody in the region effort to get this done. So everybody in the region, regardless of their role and responsibility, has a stake in your success. Make sure that you share success. It's really important that you recognize when something has worked well, and so make sure you recognize those that facilitate that success, and then just share that success with others through the recognition forms, the other forms, the engagement forms, on the calls that we talked about. It's a way to make sure that other people are understanding how you were able to be successful. So lots of ways to do that. Make sure that you're building capacity through priority deployment. You'll hear more about that, but the priority deployment process really provides an opportunity to identify those promotable volunteers that need a specific experience to be able to be promoted, and you're going to be able to deploy them. We worked on this with the RMS team. There's a set of expectations around how they'll be deployed, how they'll be tracked, how you'll work with your division team to get the support for that, and hopefully by deploying them, you'll have them return with the additional skills that'll both support your regional capacity development, but also divisional and national capacity development, which was really, we're looking for all three of those things. Make sure you're looking at your capacity on a regular schedule. So capacity is merely a snapshot in time. You need to be reviewing your capacity on a regular basis, really on a quarterly basis at a minimum, to have a sense of who you've got and who you don't have, because people transition, people's lives change. They're not always going to be available. So that capacity is going to be dynamic. Ask questions and get feedback. If something isn't working or you don't understand, I'm going to say it again, don't suffer in silence. Ask for questions, or ask for answers, and ask for help. We're here to support you, and you need to let us know what you need so we can help improve the processes, the doctrine, and job tools for your region, and for others participating in this phase of the pilot, and for those regions who will participate in pilots down the road. So it's critically important really to know the level of support that's out there for you, and we're going to look at that specific support next. And so you're going to have access to the following tools as a part of this. One is a Train People Available SharePoint site, and so you're going to have pilot resources stored in that location. That's going to include your priority deployment list, which is maintained by the regions and divisions and utilized by RMS as well. And that supports your ability to work with RMS to recruit and deploy priority responders. We're going to leverage Yammer. If you haven't seen Yammer, it actually is a pretty cool way to exchange information. It's a chat tool that allows for cross-regional sharing of information, for requests for support, and much more. And it's going to be built into the SharePoint site, and it's a transparent way of exchanging data, allowing you as a region or division team or volunteer services or others to see and share activities and questions and comments. If you have a question, probably everybody else has the same question as well. Additionally, we've got an email just specifically for this pilot. That's trainedpeople@redcross.org. That's Romeo India trainedpeople@redcross.org. That is your go-to email address for your questions, comments, and concerns, and that's monitored by the Disaster Workforce Readiness team. Two-way feedback for us is really, really critical. It's going to be ongoing throughout the pilot, and it's going to incorporate both the informal information shared and received through the tools I just mentioned and through the formal dashboard review process. So let's take a quick look. Let's review quickly the items we went through today. We introduced the key stakeholders. We reviewed the roles and responsibilities of divisions and regions. We highlighted the importance of defining your project team, and really want to emphasize how much the NHQ team is here to support you and to assure your success. We looked at the 15 participating regions that represent all divisions across this great nation. We briefly reviewed the goals of the Readiness Initiative and the focus of this pilot. We described the pilot, which fundamentally is designed to strengthen structure and processes to build and sustain the capacity and capability of the disaster workforce to reliably deliver our mission. It aligns DCS workforce readiness and volunteer services support to develop a right-sized, skilled employee and volunteer workforce. We talked about the pilot areas of focus, so that's within the trained people available lane that focus on the following areas. That's affirming the disaster workforce engagement position and disaster workforce engagement team as the enablers of effective workforce engagement. We talked about aligning volunteer structure and supporting functional services to attain steady state disaster workforce readiness. And we talked about fully staffing the region level 3 table of organization by adopting the engagement, staffing, and training functions to attain disaster operational readiness. And again, you'll see a lot of this stuff in our more detailed webinars on those specific topic areas. We talked about the dashboard review process, the elements of the feedback and the way it would work, and that included our monthly calls and our final feedback calls. We discussed our 9 measures and metrics that are designed specifically for this pilot and the way that information will be captured. We discussed the resources provided by national headquarters, and that included documents and job tools and standardized table of organization and many other things. We took a look at the timeline. We talked about the region actions for success and discussed the project team expectations. And we talked about the support and feedback process. And again, don't suffer in silence. I'll say it one more time. So really want to emphasize that this is a collaborative effort, not only within regions, but also within and across divisions with national headquarters support and with a very strong linkage, I'm going to say it again, to volunteer services. So volunteer services is really critical to the success of this. So please, please, please engage with your volunteer services team. So all of that said, that wraps up our presentation today, and we'll be ready to answer any questions. And again, if you have questions, what I'd ask, we'll start off with questions in the chat box and go with those first. And once we work through those, we will open the phone lines and encourage additional questions. So we do have, we're at a good time right now. We've got about 15 minutes. So again, I'd encourage you to put those chat questions in the box. And we do have our first question, great question. And I'm actually going to, Lisa, you're unmuted. Nancy, I'm going to unmute you as well so that you can answer questions. And here is our first question. So within the success measures, there are several mentions of positions or gaps mixed in with level 3. Are we going to define those more, or, for example, X number of people in volunteer connection positions and X number of people gapped and who will deploy?
You want me to take that one?
Please.
Yes. So that will be defined. It'll be defined down to the actual position and gap required to fill that position. We will be getting into those kinds of specifics on one of the upcoming webinars. And James, maybe you have the date of the one that will get into those specifics. I don't have that right at my fingertips.
We do, yeah. So the regional steady state TOs is that one is discussed on July the 18th. That's next Tuesday. And level 3 TOs and gaps are discussed on Thursday, July the 20th. And hopefully all these calls are at 3 p.m. Eastern. So that helps you remember that. I did have a request to display the slide for participating regions, and so I've done that. You can look and see who your other colleagues are that will be participating in this. So next question we have is, and Nancy, this is probably one for you, I think. For the EDGE curriculum completed metric, does it include courses completed prior to assignment of the curriculum, and are there targets for those specific metrics?
Actually, James, if you don't mind, I'm gonna take that one.
Great, please, yeah.
The action planning template and training plan template will also be explained in much more detail in our upcoming webinars. But if a candidate for a particular position has already taken some of the training, then that training would already be attributed to that candidate and would not go on the training plan necessarily. So what we're trying to do here is to just not only measure those qualified workers that you have to fill boxes, but also that the candidates that you've identified are progressing through their training. So yes, absolutely. If a candidate needs 3 courses and they've already taken 2 of the 3, the 2 they've already taken absolutely get attributed to them. They do not have to repeat courses just for the sake of completing a training curriculum.
And the second question, Lisa, was around the targets for the metrics themselves.
I'm sorry, repeat that question, then I somehow missed that.
That's okay. It's just, and I think it may have related to the training pieces, but were there targets for these metrics?
Targets?
It may be. Yeah. I mean, if the questioner might just maybe shoot me a little more clarifying information, were there specific metrics, or were these? Yeah.
This is how I'm understanding the way the questions are being asked, so you should definitely write into James if I don't understand this. But you're asking if there are targets around the metrics of filling the positions on the TOs, is I think what you're asking. The answer to that is no. We're measuring the number of boxes that are filled, but our goal, we don't expect you to have every box filled by the end of the pilot, nor even by the end of the fiscal year. It literally can take years to build a manager toward your level 3 TO. So what we're really measuring and paying close attention to is that the assessment's been done, the action plans have been completed, and the training plans have been completed and are being carried out, and that people are participating in the priority deployment opportunities and are making themselves available when disasters happen so that, they can get the experience they need. There's not any way in my 30 years of experience to, pull somebody in off the street and turn them into a manager, without some intervention on our part, like training and experience. No matter what kind of experience they come in with from the outside, they're still going to have to, they're still going to have to learn disaster. So I think that is the question you asked.
I think you've got it. And just I think just kind of clarifying, I got kind of an update from the questioner. So essentially, just a measure to reflect progress. That's really what we're looking at, correct, Lisa?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Now let me clarify one thing. We are going to track the boxes that are filled, right? We are going to track that, but only for the purposes of assessment and knowing where everyone is in the process. So you will see those things measured, but it isn't. We're not holding you accountable to have every box filled by a certain time frame.
So on the next question I have, and Nancy, this one may be for you, and I can answer it. I think I can answer it as well. But where can I find the job tool for creating a report that tells me which volunteers had a certain training? And so certainly there is an Edge page on the Exchange. But Nancy, do you want to add any further details to that?
No, they can get it there, or if they're checking a volunteer's profile, they can find it in Volunteer Connection as well.
And certainly, if you haven't, that's our disaster workforce engagement team. And when I say that, I mean your disaster workforce engagement manager and team have connectivity with the folks that manage and administer Edge. So certainly, when you talk with your DWE manager, if they're not sure, they should reach out. Again, they can reach out through the email address. If they're not sure who the DWE person is at national headquarters. But we can answer that question for you and get you directed in the right way. So if you're not sure, if your DWE manager is not sure, then ask the question, and we'll make sure you get the information you need to be able to do that. Next question is, when will the GAP competencies, which are currently on the Exchange, be updated?
Yeah, the GAP competencies and required training and physical capacity are all now included in the position descriptions. And then when the Volunteer Connection is updated itself with the new gaps in it, we'll have what we're calling a learning path spreadsheet for you, which will include those 3 elements for each position so that you can use the spreadsheet to see the track from service associate on up in one spreadsheet area. But those will all be done when Volunteer Connection is updated at the end of the month.
And Nancy, this one another one for you that we may be able to answer on the call, or if this doesn't work, then we could certainly we could follow up with the questioner offline as well. But just around the term we're using around positions as it applies to a TO, and then how that somehow relates to positions in Volunteer Connection. Can you describe that? I'm asking the question in the right way. So can you describe how the term position is being used as it relates to both TO and Volunteer Connection?
For the steady state TO?
Yeah, James, are they asking about operational, or are they asking about the difference that between a gap and a position description, or are they asking for the steady state?
Let's go with steady state, and if the questioner could send me an update on that, if it's not correct, then let's start with steady state though.
Okay, volunteer services recruits by the position descriptions, which the steady state ones are now all in the global template in Volunteer Connection. So when you ask for one of the required or optional positions, using the naming convention that's in the job tool that's posted on the toolkit, Volunteer Connection, or Volunteer Services rather, will then recruit that person and put that position on the needs assessment that it needs to be recruited, or that you need a person to fill that position. So if you need a mass care regional program lead, the position they will put on the needs assessment is for the regional program lead, using that position description that's in the global template.
Okay, and I'll make sure you got the contact information for the questioner Nancy as well, if there's any additional questions on that as well. So next question, Lisa, this one would be for you. Will the dashboard provide regions at the regional level the same assessment of progress that we can see at the national headquarters level? So basically, are regions going to be able to see what we see at national headquarters?
Yes. That's certainly our goal. Yes, we want the dashboard to be a tool for you, not a secret thing that we only see at national. So yeah, definitely yes. Now, whether you can run those reports yourself, if that's what you're asking too, that I can't answer, because I think some of the reports can be pulled by regions, and some of the reports are going to be compiled at national headquarters, because the information is coming out of more than one system in order to answer a particular metric. But we absolutely intend to share that with you and ask you even to use those dashboards with disaster and volunteer services together to talk about how to use the information to make even better progress.
So, Lisa, sort of a follow-up on the dashboard. At least this is another really good question. Is there any chance that the dashboard could reflect progress by chapter? Because obviously that could be a really helpful management tool for DPMs as they do their work.
I do not know the answer to that question. I will have to check with somebody who knows more about data than I do and get back. So, James, if you can track who's asking that question, so we can.
Certainly. Okay. Okay, I'm not seeing any. I'm going to give everybody another couple of minutes to see if there's other questions in the chat box. I think we've answered all the questions in the chat box so far. So another minute on any additional questions in the chat box, and then we'll open up the phones here in just a second. So about 4 minutes left. So not seeing any additional questions in the chat box, I'm going to go ahead and open up the phones. I would ask if you are not intending to ask a question, could you please put your phone on mute? So mute, *6, whatever you need to do to get it on mute. We want to avoid any background noise. I'm about ready to open up all the phone lines here now, so stand by. All right, lots of So if you're on the, all the phones are unmuted now. So if you're talking, if you could please put your phone on mute, or if you've got background conversations, put your phone on mute to make sure that we are, make sure that we can hear any questions. So, do we have any questions out there from the field? So, anybody like to speak up? Any questions? We've got a lot of callers on the phone. So any questions from any of the team that's on the phone right now? Okay, so it looks like, Lisa, Nancy, I think we don't have any additional questions in the chat box. And one more opportunity for last questions from the phone. Okay, so I want to say thanks. I want to honor your time here. We've got about 2 minutes left. Just a quick reminder on upcoming pilot sessions. So this Thursday at 3 o'clock Eastern Time, we have the Disaster Workforce Engagement webinar. Next Tuesday, Regional Steady State TOs. Next Thursday, July the 20th, we have a discussion of Level 3 TOs and gaps. And then finally, we have a webinar on July the 25th, which is our pre-kickoff question and answer session. So really one more opportunity to ask questions. So in the meantime, I'd encourage you, if you have any questions, you think about something that you may want to know, shoot an email to ritrainedpeople@redcross.org. We'll get that in, try and get that answered for you as quickly as possible. Don't suffer in silence. And we really appreciate and thank you for all of the work you do day to day to help our communities and to make our communities safer. And we're hopeful that this pilot will support you in building the capacity you need to be even more successful. So again, thanks everybody, and that's the end of the call.